The PS5 Pro has been talked about at length in the past, but this time around, we gotta dive deeper into fan reception of this console. So without further ado, let's break that all down. Up next. What's going on, guys? It's Kalo, and I'm here to give you the lowdown on all things gaming. And if you're new here, feel free to subscribe to this channel for weekly video game news content. Drop a like on the video, and welcome to the Weekend XP Share. Alrighty, so the PS5 Pro is a console which we've talked about so many times in the past. My stance on this console remains consistent here, that Sony released an overpriced console that doesn't have any real upfront need, at least at this point in time. This is an enthusiast console at its finest, and I'm sure there are people out there that dig it, and hey, you're entitled to that, and I hope you find joy in that. But as of right now, pre-orders for the console have gone live at all the big retail spots like Walmart, Amazon, GameStop, and so on. So there is the big test for the PS5 Pro, and this is going to be one thing that is really telling for the console, and what people really think about it. Now, I only say this because PlayStation themselves did release the console through their own website, PlayStation Direct, and that was all back on September 27th. And wouldn't you know it, just up until a few days ago, you could still get it there. So, there's one instance of that console not selling out right away. Now, to kind of lay some groundwork here, there was this idea that was floated out there that some people could possibly be waiting to acquire their console through a place like GameStop, which is plausible and weird to say at the same time. That's because we all know good old GameStop. Now, this reason here is because some locations were running a trade-in deal for the original PS5, where you could get a pretty big chunk of in-store credit that could then be put towards the PlayStation 5 Pro. And as far as numbers go there, I believe it was around $400, which is pretty helpful. Now that brings us to today. Whereas the time I wrote out this here video, and that's on Friday morning around 9:30, the console, at least to my knowledge, has yet to sell out anywhere. And I did catch wind that retailers like Best Buy were rushing people through checkouts, at least when they dropped it on their website, warning them that the console can and most likely will sell out. But for the sake of being right, I legit just checked the website again, just to be sure. And wouldn't you know it, they are still available for pre-order. And when you do place a pre-order through websites like this, more often than not, they don't charge you up front. So at the very least, if you had some vested interest in this console, much like I do, you could secure one at no cost, at least up front. And then if you decide this console truly isn't for you, you can always cancel it and it won't hit your card. Now, I bring up that point because I think it's ultimately a risk-free situation, and that in turn could get you more pre-orders knowing that, hey, I might not have to pay for it after all if I really don't want it. So again, people could be more inclined to pre-order the console, selling it out. Long story short here, the PS5 Pro has gotten a lukewarm response from fans, and that's at best. But I don't think that has to do with the fans. This all stems back to PlayStation themselves. That $700 to $800 price tag was a huge ask for average consumers. And this goes without saying. That's my only gripe with the console. It's just the price. I do think when I look back on the PS5 Pro, it'll be a pretty good console. And I do think features like PSSR make it a rather interesting one, especially when talking about future game releases like Ghost of Yotai. But this is where I ask the question of, is a GPU boost and PSSR really worth that price bump? Honestly, I'd be very interested to see what PlayStation's internal expectations were for this console, because I'd like to think when big companies release a console, they do want to reel in a broad audience. And that's clearly not the case what they're doing here. And when looking back on the PS4 Pro, which I do own, I've seen a big reason to go out and upgrade, and that was 4K and the substantial upgrades it offered compared to the base PS4. When I look at the PS5 Pro to the base PS5, I really can't see that big of a margin. I also can't help but factor in this idea that when the PS4 Pro did launch, From what I remembered, it launched at a $400 price tag, and the base PS4 dropped in price too. And again, that's not happening here. I do think at the end of the day, PlayStation really stacked the deck against them, and that's right out of the gate with the PS5 Pro. And I do think the whole gaming industry right here should be taking notes, especially when it comes to fan reception of the PS5 Pro and what their next console release could possibly look like if they get a little too greedy. Now, the big console releasing, barring any kind of surprise here, I'd like to think is the Switch 2. And I've said before, I do think the Switch 2 will most likely come in at a $400 to $500 price tag, which I do think is more than reasonable, as long as it performs up to the standards that rumors have set out. But next gen for Xbox and PlayStation are gonna be really interesting, especially when you look at how a console like the Pro is supposed to be. At the end of the day, they're a little sample of what tech can do nowadays within gaming. So I do think the next generation of Xbox and PlayStation will most likely outperform the Pro. So again, if it comes in at that price point, we are screwed. But with all that being said, I'm gonna pass this off to you guys. I know I'm beating a dead horse here when it comes to the PS5 Pro, but I do want to get your thoughts on this. But that about does it here. I've been K-Lo, I gave you the lowdown on all things gaming, and if you're new here, feel free to subscribe to this channel for weekly video game news content, drop a like on the video, and this has been the Level Up.